Hi, I'm Mark Manster, architecture critic of the Dallas Morning News and author of The Man in the Glass House, and you're listening to USModernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. This week, we gladly explore the ever-growing world of cocktails, a class of beverage long associated with the social life of 1950s and 60s modernism, even to the extent that some houses had built-in cocktail bars and closets. Closets. Wow.
Yes, cocktail closets.
And now, fully recovered from the Modernism Week party circuit, your host, George Smart.
Hi, folks. In the last 2 months, from coast to almost coast, I've learned a lot about drinking. Not so much from direct experience, which was quite modest, but from meeting so many people with convergent interest in modernist architecture and the beverage arts. Or is it the liquid arts? Or maybe the cocktail sciences? We'll start today's show in New York City, where I sat down with the organizers of Cocktails and Conversations, a long-running and wildly popular AIA New York architecture event. And later on in Palm Springs, California, Tom and I talk with Australia's Philip Jones, a.k.a. the Martini Whisperer. Women want him. Men want to be like him. We certainly did. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In a story that we are largely making up, Angela Roll worked her way through college by brilliantly dancing the Mambo No. 5 and doing some off-the-books house flipping, sometimes simultaneously. At the age of 22, following a fabulous party at a famous hillside modernist house in L.A. involving late-night swimming, fig-infused goat cheese, absolute limon, and a winking Julia Schulman, Angela was recruited to architecture school, where she spent years in sleep-deprived studios. I thought the people in the studios were sleep-deprived.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, it's free with purchase.
Yes.
Upon graduation, after a big old nap, she became a modernist real estate agent with specialized design training. Realtor Angela Roll specializes in modernist houses, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to staging a martini party for 200 from 2,800 miles away. And that last part is true.
Yes.
Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL or 919-995-0550.
We'll start in New York City. Architects Abby Suckle and William Sanger are the authors of Cocktails and Conversations, Dialogues in Architectural Design. Their new book covers 40 of their past events and 40 drink recipes based on a simple concept. Invite people to AIA New York Center for Architecture to hear a famous architect. Introduce a master bartender. Have him mix a drink to align with that architect and share it with a thirsty audience. Then have a journalist interview the architect, making for fascinating cocktails and conversations on a Friday night in Manhattan. Architects in the series have included David Adjaye, Jeanne Gang, Peter Gluck, our own Frank Harmon, Louisa Hutton, Tom Kundig, Daniel Libeskind, Eric Owen Moss, among many others. I spoke with Abby and William at the Long Island Bar, 110 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. Joining us are David Moo and Toby Cecchini, the master bartenders behind all the cocktail creations. We huddled around a table in the back about 5 p.m. And yes, cocktails were served, and they were delicious.
We'll start with Abby Suckle. Hi, Abby.
Hi.
Tell me how this Cocktails and Conversations got started.
Okay, every cultural institution in New York City on Friday nights has a cultural event with alcoholic beverages. And alas, the Center for Architecture happened to be closed. So I was there one Friday night complaining that even some of the uninteresting culturals were doing special events on Friday, and the person next to me happened to be Charles Renfro, I said, that you should come here on a Friday night and do something with alcohol. So he said, well, I can't just talk by myself. I said, no, it has to be fun. We have to talk about design. So we got Charles and Justin Davidson from New York Magazine, and the man on the other side happened to be Andy Pennington from Porcelain and Nose. He said, it's such a good idea, I think I'll sponsor this. So he sponsored our first event, and in the process, we met Toby, who was able to, we said we need to have a cocktail in the spirit of the architect's work so that we can celebrate design in all its mediums. And Toby crafted a cocktail specially for Charles and Justin Davidson, and the event was a big hit, and after that there was no stopping us. So what it became was basically 6 years where we found architects who we thought were interesting, informative, had done something, and lively. We thought that was kind of a criteria too, and they should be better known, some of them, and some of them are very well known. It's a blend of people. We've got journalists, historians, we've had clients, we've had all sorts of pairings, and they've produced, over the course of 6 years, about 40 different beverages. In the process, what it turned out when we were putting the book together was that it was a book about how to do architectural design, and it actually hit on all the issues that are really important to architects who are practicing. Everything from architecture and politics, how you look at drawings, and the people who discuss these issues were people who are grappling with it on a daily basis. There's not a lot published on architectural design and how to do it. And this became, a light version of how do you approach architecture.
Toby Cecchini and David Moo were the mixologists for these events.
Some of them.
Most of them. So do you remember what the first drink was at the first event?
I don't. I'd have to go back and look at Charles Renfro's. I mean, it's in the books. New Orleans? There were about 16 New Orleans cocktails, though. It's in the book. That was Charles Renfro, the first one?
Yes.
Yeah, so in fact, I can so not remember it that routinely when David and I are going through drinks and we're drumming things up, we'll come up with a cocktail. Or what we often do is what we term Mr. Potato Head, where you take a classic cocktail and you pull out part of it and you plug in something else and you pull out another part and you plug in something there. And then we'll stop and ask ourselves, wait a minute, have we done this one for anybody yet? This is in the course of 6 years, and the first one we did a variation on an old New Orleans cocktail called the Vieux Carré, and we did the Carré Squared for Charles Renfro. But, for example, if, somewhere down the line, 3 or 4 years later, we might be like, oh, let's do a Vieux Carré. That would be a great drink, for completely forgetting that we'd already have done some variation on that drink.
It always turns out that they're never exactly the same, even when we have reinvented the wheel 14 times. But, yes, it's true. We do always need to know.
Don't you remember that all architects basically love martinis? And so, unfortunately, all bartenders hate them because it's not that interesting to shake up vodka or gin.
No, we love martinis. We just can't make a martini for every single architect.
Yeah.
But if you'll note, we have actually figured out a way to make some kind of martini for several different architects by
you
changing
actually made one martini 3 times.
Well, that's true. That was for one of them.
One 3 times. So effectively our mandate is to craft a cocktail that reflects sort of the trajectory or history of whatever architect we're working with that particular month. Combined with, we also get to interview them and figure out what their particular
fabulous interests are.
Yeah, exactly. And so if they say, I don't touch anything but tequila, just make sure, but almost every single architect says, oh, for me it's the martini. It's got to be a martini. My architecture is pure and clean and blah, blah, blah. For me, it's like every single one of them says it. We're like, yes, I'm certain. As
However.
have said 35 of your predecessors. But
So wait a second. So no one said, I like pina coladas?
No, sometimes they do. Every once in a while somebody says, I really love Moscow Mule. And so we'll give them some variation on that or whatever it is. But most of the time, Yeah, they say, "Oh, I love the cleanliness of a martini."
Well, we've had a few say, I like bourbon.
Yeah,
I like
sure.
Scotch.
I like Scotch.
It's helpful. Anything that they say, if they say a Moscow Mule, for example, we're not going to make them a Moscow Mule necessarily, but we can say, oh, they seem to prefer vodka and they like ginger apparently.
Yeah.
So let's start with that and see if that fits the their architectural sort of framework. And let's work with that and go from
Also,
there.
we're taking into account, we always try to hew to something about their design and aesthetic and something about the history of the way in which they've worked as architects and maybe touching on particular pieces or whatever, but we're also taking into account things about their personal biography. So it's not just what they like to drink, it's also where they're from and where they went to school and where their summer house is. It might be anything that moves us to come up with.
So you're talking to them prior to the event, and I assume that's over the phone, right?
Yeah, we interview them on the phone. Yeah.
Okay. That must be fascinating just in itself.
Fascinating in that if you've ever tried to track down world-class architects, it's
really fast.
And get 20 minutes of their time.
It's
at
big
a
game
certain
hunting
time.
often, but
Yes.
yeah, if you actually get them on the phone, it can be great. Yeah, it's very hard to get these people to answer communications, but when you do get to talk to them, they're often great about it.
William Singer has been working on this project as well with Abby and is also a co-author of the book. Welcome, William.
Thank you very much.
How did you get these architects to come? Was the format part of the appeal?
I think it was the format. It's such an unusual event, having the relaxed camaraderie on a Friday evening. In Vino Veritas, the event loosens people up. The audience, the speakers, the interlocutor, the interviewer, it becomes quite collegial, I would say, in most cases, especially after the sort of formal presentation. We open it up to the floor. There's lots of good interaction with the audience.
Abby, how did you know this thing was going to be a hit, that you were going to be doing it for years and years?
Well, when 200 people showed up and they were calling you early to try to get their name in at the door, you kind of knew it might be okay. But given the cast, the conversation, and the booze, it was kind of a winner. And it's like if you have a party and you only invite good people to your party, pretty soon everybody wants to come. So we don't really have any trouble getting architects
The
or
word
journalists.
spreads.
Yeah. So they all just check their schedules. It's pretty easy.
The first event with Charles Renfro was a great one to start with because Charles is a great, great talker, and he had a few drinks and he got a little toasted. I'm not sure if this is for podcast publication, but he was hilarious. He was absolutely hilarious. And then he wore these funny socks. And they started talking about his socks in the audience. It became quite jovial. And it was right before Christmas as well. It was December 6th, if I recall. Something like that.
November.
Late November. So it was...
Architects and alcohol go way back.
Yes.
Way back, but you get a very different. William's right. You get a very different sort of vibe in the room immediately because we come out first. David and I come out first. We introduce the drink and we talk about it for 10 minutes and whatnot, and then we make the drink for everybody in the room, and they can sort of relax, and the people on stage can relax, and you get a very different pitch and timbre out of those people after a half hour of just consuming one cocktail. It brings everything down to a much more relaxed level, and people talk about surprising things. People talk about very surprising things where you wouldn't necessarily have that with a group of public figures on stage who are aware that they're not only on stage but being filmed, and the film's going out to a larger audience. It brings everything down to a much more sort of convivial conversation.
So these were not recorded?
Everything was recorded.
Everything was recorded.
Everything was recorded.
And where are those recordings now?
It's all posted online on both the AIA website and the Culture Now's website.
Okay. I tried to find it today. That's why I asked, and there were a lot of...
I've only found them on Culture Now. I think it's hard to access.
Well, the AIA has redone their website, so it could use a little help with the navigation.
Okay.
I have transcripts of everything, too, because we made transcripts before we did the book.
Which is what is important about this book. These are small précis of a larger, longer conversation.
Yeah.
We edited it to try to pick out the most salient points of the talk that night.
What I really like about looking through the book is in a couple pages, you can get a sense of that architect and their projects and their design philosophy and what they like to drink.
If they like to drink.
Or at least what we decide that they like to drink.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you ever have Zaha Hadid come?
No,
One of
she
yours?
died.
She died. Well, yes, she did die, but before she died.
No.
No, she didn't make it?
She didn't make it.
Did Calatrava come?
No, we did not. But we've had David Adjaye, we've had Daniel Libeskind, we've had,
Maximiliano Fuchsis,
we've had a lot of,
A-level world-class architects.
since we don't pay for them to fly here, if they happen to be in New York,
In town.
we let them, we give them an evening. And so it's been a lot of fun.
I imagine if Calatrava came, the drink would cost $250, but you get 10 years to pay for it.
You know, on that subject, I have to say that this has been a pretty interesting view of how people who don't do this for a living represent themselves publicly. Like, some of these people are an absolute gas, and they just hold the room absolutely in thrall. And some of these huge, huge architects just bore the living piss out of the entire room. And routinely, it's the ones who refuse to drink that are the snoozes. Or they'll say, make me a drink that looks like the drink that I can hold, but I don't drink. So, you know, or they just simply refuse outright to have anything to do with the drink. Almost invariably, those are the ones where the audience is just being held hostage. Whereas the people who embrace the drink and the spirit of the thing are almost invariably the ones who really hold the room and tell the best stories and get people really engaged in it.
As you can tell, we strongly endorse the use of alcohol.
Yes. So, as mixologists, who are some of your favorite architects to listen to up there?
Good question.
I really like David Adjaye, actually. I think that
David Adjaye was great. Morris Ajmi is a lot of fun. Brett Klopfil I thought was great.
He drank before the party.
He drank,
He
yeah.
had a couple of drinks before the party.
To test.
Greg Pasquarelli.
Testing, yes, research.
Greg Pasquarelli of Shop was great, fun.
Libeskind.
Libeskind didn't drink.
It's true, he didn't drink, but he actually is an exception. He managed to still give a sort of fascinating presentation from the beginning.
Well, his ice cubes were an art form in themselves.
Well,
It
thank you
were
very much.
custom,
I think we made
designed
our best
ice
drink
cubes.
for Daniel Libeskind.
Yeah.
We
Was that drink?
We made it into. I wanted to make
It's
something.
a martini. First, let's first of all
wasn't
say, well,
No, it wasn't.
It's in the martini family. It's definitely in the martini family.
So he of course said a martini.
Martini-esque.
He of course said a martini, but we'd already done a martini for
Hugh Hardy.
Hugh
Hardy.
Hardy, who was great fun.
That
We
was
did
some
three
free
different.
martinis.
I did the history of the martini in 3 different cocktails.
It was
for Hugh Hardy.
wonderful. It was like a martini tasting.
So for Libeskind, I wanted to do a drink that was an entire cocktail rendered in a very clear form, with no actual sugar in it, no actual citrus in it.
We wanted all of the
but an
things that
entire
complicated the flavor to be opaque, or in fact clear, so that the person drinking the cocktail would receive what looked like a clear glass of water, and that it wouldn't belie in any way the flavors that would then be involved in the actual drink. So we went through some very serious backbends in order to create something that had the flavors that it had without
Without the color?
without any color.
with no color whatsoever. It's just simply a transparent drink. So what we did was we crafted an entire cocktail. It was vodka with pomelo and shiso leaf. And then we took that into what's called a rotovap, or a rotary evaporator, which is a still for medical use that stills under a vacuum. So
I think I've seen that on Iron Chef, maybe?
Maybe so.
Yeah.
And so you can distill things at room temperature, or at a clement temperature, so you don't have to heat anything
And
for
in
it
minutes
to
instead of in
vaporize.
hours.
And so you get, in effect, this incredibly clean distillate that you can rip out immaculate flavors and aromas from things. So we use shiso and pomelo, but none of that gets bastardized by heat. So we took this drink and put it through a rotary evaporator under vacuum and got this clear distillate out of it, and then diluted that down a bit with just straight vodka, absolute elix. And we just put it in a double old-fashioned glass with a big plinth-like sort of architectural ice cube crafted by a sculptural ice maker in Queens.
So
It looks like a doorstop. So it was just
exactly projecting out of the drink in order to get some of those sort of sharp triangles that are
Libeskind-esque.
Exactly.
It's a fractured sculpture.
Okay.
all the
So,
wedge.
what is shiso leaf?
Shiso leaf is sometimes referred to as Japanese basil. It's in the mint family. It's a herb. You get it. If you ever have sushi and you have that green jagged tooth thing that's sometimes actually made of plastic, that thing on the side of your plate at a sushi restaurant is either real shiso or it's an imitation plastic piece of something to look like shiso.
Yes, I've had plastic shiso many times.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did it taste?
It was delicious. It was delicious. I could imagine it in a drink. Now, before this series of events went on, what did the AIA do for get-togethers?
Well, they had plenty of parties.
Okay.
That was never a problem. But, we also co-chair the Architecture Dialogue Committee, which is a fancy way of saying it's sort of the design thinking committee. So we felt that as our committee, the AIA has basically a committee structure, is how they run, and they have committees for anything anyone is interested in, from transportation to justice to education, healthcare. But they also have design. We're with basically the design thinking committee, and so our mandate is to have programs that talk about design issues that people face. So we thought that hearing from practitioners talking about their thinking was a suitable series of programming.
The important thing, though, is that the Friday night, the Center for Architecture was down. It was black. So here was an opportunity to get people into the center and have an intelligent, relaxing conversation early enough so that people could still go out on Friday night and have another social life. So it's sort of the overture to a larger evening.
Of the 200 people that come to an event,
Yes.
how many of them are architects versus not?
It's an interesting question, actually. We make all the architects do a little presentation with images of their theme of what they're going to talk about that evening, and it's relatively short. And then we, that's a shiso leaf.
Hold a second. Stop the presses. We have a shiso leaf in my hand. It's a very beautiful, actually.
Taste
I'm
it.
now I can eat this?
You can.
Tear it in
also
half and
you can
smell
before
it.
you do that, smell it.
I'm now smelling the shiso.
with a cold.
Yes.
But taste it.
But it helps.
Now I'm eating the shiso. It's delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's better than plastic.
Yeah. Much
No,
better.
but the sushis that have like mackerel and stuff on shiso leaves often with
Tuna.
it
They
works
often,
really
they
good.
often have it as fried tuna.
I see.
Sashimi.
That's SHISO.
Yeah.
Okay, go on. Architects versus non-architects.
Okay, so typically we make them do a little presentation about their theme for the evening. We tell them not to do all the work since they graduated from school, but just to select an issue that they're interested in to frame the discussion so that when the interviewer talks to them, there's at least a topic that they're talking around, and that's been the most successful. And then that makes sure that the people in the audience, you can't guarantee actually know the architect's work, but at least everyone sees it. What our audience tends to be, we get a lot of architects, we get a lot of friends and family. We don't get anywhere near as much of the general public as we would like. So it tends to be professionals,
Okay.
architects, and students.
Students, okay.
Yeah.
You know, lots of students.
Yeah.
And lots of young architects, those who are not licensed yet. That's one of our missions, is to get as many younger people into the AIA New York as possible.
Okay.
But again, it depends on who the speaker is. You know, we had, I think, 300 people the night. There was one right after Trump got elected, and it was all about basically architecture and politics and what's the role of the architect. And we had Michael Murphy from Mass Design and Michael Sorokin from City, and I think there were 300 people, and it didn't become a normal program at all. It became something completely different, where they talked about, you know, where do we go from here? How do you change the country? You know, and Michael Murphy with Mass Design, basically they're doing a lot of NGO work in Africa, and they're getting a lot of prizes for it, so it's the question of the role of the architect.
I really like visiting the AIA Center for its exhibitions.
Yeah.
In fact, I had Sekou Cook on the podcast a couple months ago, who was a great guest. Do you have a tie-in at all between the exhibitions and the series?
Not directly.
No, they do a lot of programming with all the exhibitions. Since there's a lot connected with them anyway, they don't need something else.
Okay.
And they're programmed years out in advance.
Yes.
And our schedules tend to be more on the fly, ad hoc, based on the availability of the architect or the designer that we're asking to participate.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to get that coordinated.
But I don't think you want to. I think you need, because there's a lot of programming with all the exhibitions. Anyway.
Exactly.
So it doesn't, if you're doing something on Indian architecture, just having another Indian architect show up doesn't really make that much difference.
Okay. Now, I have a question about this format that you've done, which is just stellar. Is there any extension of this, say, to a public participation forum? Like, let's have people comment on the new LaGuardia over cocktails at the AIA. Has that been tried yet?
Not yet, but that's a good idea.
No, there's a question and answer part at the end of each one of these where audience members ask questions of the architect. But, that's...
Not as a public forum,
No.
like you're suggesting, which is an interesting idea.
No, they have public forums. They have those kind of things. They have all the time. And they have lots and lots of programming at the Center for Architecture. So this is not their only thing. And it's probably in New York City, there's at least 20 architecture and design organizations, all programming. So, there's at least 2 lectures tonight that are big draws.
What's coming up for the series? Who's on the docket for the next couple of cocktails and conversations?
The next one we have is Toshiko Mori and Fred Bernstein. We have a very interesting one, which we're going to do with 2 other committees, that is going to be April 8th, which is a different night for us, with Brenda Levin from Los Angeles and Ann Beha from Boston, and we're going to talk about the gender of preservation, because both of those women in their own cities made a career on their own doing preservation architecture, and they're both very, very successful. Vishan Chakraparty and Justin Davidson again is also on the schedule, and we're programming into June and July now too.
We have Marlon Blackwell scheduled to come. We're trying to work out a date for him. David Childs from SOM has said he's interested. We're trying to work out a date with him. So other programs out on the horizon. We're working with another committee called the Emerging New York Architects, which is a committee at the AIA New York. We're trying to get them to help us do a joint program where they'll pick a young architect they want to have do cocktails and conversations. So we're trying to segue into as many different areas as we can.
And tell people where the Center for Architecture is located.
The Center for Architecture is located 536 LaGuardia Place, which is
not near LaGuardia. It's
it's right near NYU in the West Village.
It's near Washington Square.
Square.
For those outside New York.
So if you've got a Friday night coming up, look online, check the schedule. This is open to everyone. It sounds like a lot of fun. I want to thank all of you for chatting with me today. I do have one final question for our mixologists.
Okay.
So if I was speaking at one of these things, I would want to have some sort of combination of sake and vodka. What can you guys do with that?
I mean, you should mention that. There's a drink like that on our menu right now.
Really?
With sake and gin. We have a drink on our menu called a Martini, because there are any number of iterations you can make of a martini, but not involving cherry juice and all kinds of sweetened liqueurs and whatnot. A martini is a specific thing, and it's either vodka or gin, and it encompasses a fairly tight regimen. However, we have one currently on the menu that has gin and a type of vermouth made with a base of sherry by Lustau, one of the great sherry bodegas, and a very good Junmai Ginjo sake from Desai that softens the gin a bit and makes the whole sort of a bit more cohesive. And then it has a little bit of tincture of bergamot and pomelo together, so a little bit of citrus, a tiny little dash of citrus on the top, which negates the need for any kind of garnish whatsoever.
That sounds delicious, but if we can go to Mr. Potato Head and pull out that gin and insert the vodka, what do we do?
Easy enough.
Yeah,
of course.
Well, then you'll have to come and be a pairing for one of our cocktails and conversations, and let us know when you might be in New York, and we'll rearrange our schedule.
That sounds delicious. Thank you all. This has been great.
Thank you.
Love to have you.
let's move about 2,800 miles to the west from Brooklyn to Palm Springs, where Tom and I interviewed our next guest poolside at the swanky Hotel Skylark. For over a dozen years, Australian Philip Jones worked as a fine dining manager and ran restaurants and event companies around the world. Then he created a website for lovers of martinis, craft spirits, and cocktail culture with an Australian point of view. In 2015, he gave the first ever TED Talk on the martini, and as he was leaving the Eau de Vie bar in Melbourne one fateful night, a posse of lovely actresses came by and insisted he join them for a drink. That happens to us all the time, doesn't it, Tom?
Well, yes. In Palm Springs recently, it was Kristen Bell, Bonnie Hunt, Claire Danes, AJ Michalka, and Linda Carter, who would not let us leave the bar.
Yes.
And, of course, we could not be rude. We had to stay.
That's totally 100% accurate, Tom. Anyway, Philip Jones and I, quote, took a moment to look into their eyes and composed a martini for each of them, which the superb bar staff took note of and made. Once these actresses sampled the cocktails, they acclaimed him the Martini Whisperer. So you are from Australia. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
From Canberra? Is that how you pronounce it?
Close. Canberra.
Canberra?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You can say things like Canberra.
Canberra.
We call it the Berra.
Okay.
Canberra. Canberra. So any permutation of the above.
And what attracted you to come to Modernism Week? That's a long way to go.
It's a long way to come for a drink. It's true.
Yeah.
I've been here once before a few years ago. We'd been travelling across America, and this was our pit stop on the way out, and it kind of got under your skin a bit. It's iconic from an Australian point of view. It's a bit like, the light in the desert. It is something very greater than the sum of its parts by terms of reputation and look and feel. So to come here and see things you've only seen in books or movies, for example, is really quite compelling. It's got some star power that few other places don't.
And Australia is starting to get on the map for its own mid-century modernism.
Oh, exactly. And you got to bear in mind we're a pretty young country in the scheme of things.
As we are. Yeah, we're adolescents like you are.
It's true. So in terms of contemporary build, and talk about Canberra, for example, it's over 100 years old, technically speaking, as a formal planned city. But really the building didn't really get going until the 50s and 60s. And so there's mid-century modernist architecture hidden in plain sight all around. And so colleagues of mine are actually developing a thing called Canberra Modern, inspired by Modernism Week. And it's really having real moments. So as a city, it's evolving really, very fast. It's got a great food scene, a great wine scene, great cocktail scene. And for a long while I'm involved with tourism over there as well. So I'm a tourism award judge for both for Australia.
Oh, nice.
I'm on the 12 National Tourism Award judges. So Canberra always had this reputation of a bit like DC. Everyone was down on DC and Washington because of the politicians. And times have changed now. Now it's becoming like a cool city, a cool, innovative, modern, forward-looking city with lots of innovation, more high-tech. Twin cities relationships with like Wellington in New Zealand or Singapore. So that context, now we're now looking at our built environment and our culture in a whole new way, and actually not so insecure anymore, and actually quite proud of what we've got. Because we've got a natural environment, it's contemporary, very easy place to live, lots of natural beauty everywhere, and so it's fast becoming a real desirable place to live.
For those of us in America who failed our geography class, now tell people where the city is in relation to Australia and Sydney.
Okay, so you've got to imagine like Australia is the same size as America.
Yeah.
So it's a big place.
Big place.
Most of us live on the coast in a couple of cities. So if you find Sydney and you go kind of...
That's on the east coast?
On the right-hand side on the east coast. You go down a little bit on the map and hang a left, and we're just inland. So you could drive it in 3 hours.
Oh, 3 hours away?
Yeah. And 45 minutes flight time.
Canberra was one of these, could you say it was a planned city?
It's a completely planned city. So there was a design...
It is exactly halfway between...
Closer to Sydney than it is to Melbourne.
Oh, okay.
So at the time, we were talking the late 1800s, before Australia was becoming a country, there was a rivalry between Sydney and Melbourne, who should be the capital. And so, very long story cut short, they went around...
Split the difference.
More or less, yes. And so it's an own little territory, and about 4,000 people. Quite a young city, like I said. And... it was designed as a result of a design competition with Walter Billy Griffin and his wife Marion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So out of Chicago originally, if I recall right. And so it was a global competition, and they won it. So they actually came out and mapped out the city, and it's got some really interesting geography in sympathy with the landscape. So there's lots of geometrical forms and patterns and triangles and circles. And they stuck around in Australia for a bit longer, lived in Sydney and built some really interesting places. And so that informs the way it's built. So it's like a garden city. So from the air, it's all kind of bush and trees and mountains.
Oh, yeah.
So, and nothing's to be high rise. And so that it's a really attractive place to be.
So when did you have your first martini? That's one moment.
Ooh.
And then secondly, when did you decide it was going to be a thing for you? Like it was going to be your gig?
That's a very good question. My first conscious martini, as opposed to the ones that slip up on you in the dark of the night. I had a colleague who was graduating from military college. He was an officer, and so we were all going out one night. And I used to hang around with all these officer cadet crowd. And so we're all dressed up to the nines. And what do you do when you're all dressed up for nines and to celebrate? Let's all go for martinis. And it was a vodka martini. I remember it was not particularly good, but it was more the idea of the martini as opposed to what the drink actually was.
Right.
Yep.
Which is very common, actually.
Which is very common. This is why I'm quietly obsessed about it.
Let's all pretend we're classy.
Oh, yes, especially for the first half drink. After that, it gets a bit interesting. And so it is. It becomes quietly obsessed about it because it's one of those cocktails which is, in a way, that it's probably the only one you actually make in collaboration with the maker. Because what's going to happen, they're going to ask you what gin, what vodka, what vermouth, what garnish, how do you like it made, is it shaken, not stirred, and so on. So, and as if of its moment, it's quite ephemeral. And I think, I'm a bit superstitious, but I think it's actually influenced by their mood, your mood, where you're at, the context, the scene.
The weather.
The humidity. I hate in summer it gets too hot, too humid. We have a cocktail hour at home, and my wife likes the heat. She'll sit outside drinking Negronis, and I'm sitting inside in the air conditioning because that keeps my martinis chilled longer. So, a little bit obsessive about that. So, answer to your question. So we're talking about Canberra just a little bit. A couple of years ago, it had its 100th birthday, centenary, and part of the program was there was major festivals and major events, but they also reached out to the community to contribute in some way to the overall program. And I work from home, my own business, and I start my weekend in the right way, psychological punctuation mark. I have a martini on a Friday night, 5 o'clock, I know my weekend started. So I had maybe 2 martinis that night because I tweeted, they were reaching out to going, well, who's got an idea, let us know. And I said, I know what I'll do. To my whole 50 Twitter followers at the time, I'll make a martini for Canberra's 100th birthday. And they retweeted that to like 50,000 people. Said, Philip, that's a great idea. We can't wait to try it. And I went, heck, I've got to make it now. So what happened was, and this is how it all came together, was I then tracked down, had to be all Australian ingredients. And at the time, there weren't that many Australian spirit makers. There was a couple of gin makers, a couple of vodka makers, a couple of vermouth makers. And I just wrote to them out of the blue, you don't know me, but I've got this idea, and do you want to be part of it? Long story cut short, it just snowballed. And next thing you know, we've got a media event. The equivalent of the state governor, our chief minister, launched it. We had a ball at the National Press Club. Put black tie, we raised money for a sister city in East Timor for charity. I had a glass. And it just became the biggest thing. And we called it the Cecchini.
Okay.
As in the centenary.
Lovely. I love that.
And it got a little ring to it, so it's stuck around ever since.
When was the centennial?
2012.
Okay.
Centini.
Now, what was your job prior to this? I mean,
I had a business events company, business relationships company called Schmooze.
Okay.
And that was all about creating nice cocktail parties, basically, to facilitate business relationships.
Okay.
And we had them in galleries and bars and things like that.
Did you know that it rhymes with booze?
Strangely enough, yes. I did.
Oh, wow.
Part of my method in my madness. So the martini was part of my persona, my professional persona, swan around and all that. Anyway, so next thing I know, after this event, very successful, all this booze started turning up on my doorstep from the spirit makers around Australia. So we like what you did with this, guys. Can you review this and write this up? So I was at the point of just sort of blogging just as the craft spirit boom was evolving in Australia. Yeah. So now I have one of the biggest websites. I keep a directory of all the makers, in-depth reviews, articles, things like that. Mainly Australian spirits, but I've got contributors out of Sweden, America, Japan, who also write about what's evolving there. So it's all kind of happening all around the world about the same time. Mm-hmm. Plus the cocktail culture had this parallel evolution of that. So I was kind of at the right time, right place. And because I have a hospitality background, a tourism background, a business consulting background, I'm independent. Yeah. So they kind of trust me with the way I look at it. I've got no axe to grind. So that just evolves. So you don't go first at my place. There's plenty of stuff from around the world. And then so I keep those reviews up. So it's evolved over the years. So I now provide advice and consulting to still makers. They might be developing a new product. I do some market testing for them because they're part mad scientist, part engineer, part chemist. They may love what they're making, but they need to get an objective point of view. So I do that. I'm a member of the Distillers Association. That's a new industry body. And so it goes. And so I've been kind of riding that wave for a few years now. And along the way, this is where the Martini Whisperer part of it comes into play. So now we have an events company, and we do, like you were saying before, the architects, bespoke cocktails and special events. Got a really good team, we do those. I'll do design for clients. I'll do craft spirit appreciation events with whiskey or Australian rums or gins to really educate. So I'm an advocate and educator. so people understand the passion and the craft. And I'm working on a TV series about that as well at the moment, back in Australia. So fingers and toes crossed, we'll shoot second half of the year.
It seems like this would make a natural book or TV series. I mean, it just will lend itself to that immensely.
Absolutely, and it's a story that really hasn't been told to date. So there's wine shows and cheese shows, but to my knowledge, no one's covered this terrain yet, which is strange. So I've been pitching it last year. I've been working on it a few years, and so we've got a production company very keen to talk it up. So as we speak, they're talking to different networks to put that together.
Have you shot a pilot?
No,
Not
but
yet.
we're talking 10 episodes, 2 series.
Okay.
So that's going to be really exciting if it comes to fruition. But it's all about the place and the ecosystem. So it's not just the boozers, if you like, that is a way to define about how do you get from a bubbling spring of pure water in Tasmania on a mountaintop, how does that end up in a cool, trendy inner-city bar in Melbourne, for example? How's that possible? And it's about the craft and the people and the place, because they're also inspired by their location. So they're hand harvesting like indigenous ingredients, and bush foods that the Aborigines would use, experimenting. So it's a brand new industry and lots of innovations happening, and you get lots of expressions. So now there's almost 200 gin makers in Australia, and that's exploded over just a handful of years.
I first stumbled into this cocktail culture in depth when I went to Maui and visited a vodka company. And I'm struggling to remember the name of it, but they come in spherical bottles. And they're pulling water from 20,000 feet deep in the ocean, which happens to be fresh.
Gosh.
And bringing it up from the ocean floor to their little plant there in Maui. And we walked through the plant and saw them putting it together. And these bottles are gorgeous just by themselves. They're like globes that have a cork in one side. So they're very recognizable. And they did vodka tastings for us. And they had another vodka, which I won't name. They're big jugs of it. and they would say, now, how many of you have heard that all vodka tastes the same? Or that all vodka is tasteless? And we all raise our hands, of course. And so they poured the crappy vodka in a little thing, and then they put theirs next to it. And sure enough, you can tell a distinct difference.
I can imagine.
In the preparation.
Could it have been ocean vodka?
Yes, Tom. Thank you.
Did the bottle look like
just like that?
Okay.
That's a beautiful looking bottle.
That's my job.
Thank you, Tom. Ocean vodka. Yep. Not a sponsor, but if you'd like to call us, please do right away. You've got an interest in architecture as well as martinis. I mean, if you're coming all the way here to Palm Springs.
There's a natural symbiosis.
Yeah.
And we've been doing these private tours as part of Modernism Week, and happily, almost every place is a bar.
Yeah.
Built in.
Yes.
And it's a resorts town, and happy hour seems to last all day. You're clearly never thirsty around here, even in the desert. It's wonderful. So what's the point of a good cocktail, you think, for a minute? It's not getting the buzz on. It's actually the bringing together of people.
Yes.
And the relaxation that involves, and the conversations and the opportunities that open up as a result of that. And that's the sign of a great cocktail party and a great cocktail culture. And it's just wonderful to see that actually alive and well in a place still in Palm Springs. You know, you meet people, they invite you over, it's open house, have a nice drink, having a good time, and it's not all night.
Yeah.
And some of the expressions of why they do this, so there's a couple we saw in the whole sunken bar thing.
Yes.
There's the swim-up pool bar. The permutations are endless, let alone the fantastic mobile bars. So, you just wheel it out wherever you go to.
Yeah.
So at home, I've got a couple of cocktail trolleys groaning under weight of some good stock. But there's nothing I like better than to invite people over and share them.
You should get one of those Qantas trolleys that they have on the plane.
Yes.
That they're serving from. That would be pretty cool.
It would be very, very cool.
I'm sure you could buy one at surplus.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
You can have you can put refrigeration units in, and perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And when I travel, I bring my own little cocktail kit. So I brought over a little cocktail mixer and my own strainers, and we even got a posse to bring over a bottle of Australian craft spirits and gins with us.
Ah, okay.
So we were able to share those with some of the locals.
Do you have a favorite Australian vodka or other ingredient?
I'm more a gin guy than a vodka guy.
Okay.
We drink more gin there than vodka in Australia for some reason.
Right.
Put me on the spot here. It depends. It depends on my mood and where I want to go. That's the thinking process. So I come each afternoon about 5:30 or about. A couple of things happen. I get my mixing glass out. I've got my things chilling nicely in the fridge or freezer, and I'll try and decide. This is why the martinis. Where do you want to go? What flavour profile do you want to explore?
So you're trying to divine what ingredients to use.
Yes.
What sort of variables do you have to work with?
Exactly. So the ratios of, say, gin to vermouth, what garnish you want to do. So sometimes I just want a nice quiet drink and have to think too much about it. So I've got my sort of go-to kind of like home brands, or I might go something a bit adventurous and I'll experiment, as well. I'll develop some of my recipes and things by pushing the envelope of what you can get away with in a martini without being too crazy about it. Just because, by the way, I should get out. I don't believe a lychee or appletini or these kind of marshmallow. They're not martinis. Let's be clear about that. It's because it's got tinny on the end of it doesn't make it a respectable cocktail at all. But there's some really nice ones out of Western Australia called West Winds Gin. Out of Melbourne Gin Company. It's been around for 5-6 years, which sounds not very long, but old in terms of where the industry's at the moment. Out of Sydney's one called Archie Rose, which is a really nice dry gin. They've all got their different personalities, so it just kind of depends which way I want to go on a particular given moment. Yes.
Have you ever crossed paths with Tim Ross and his Man About the House series?
Yes. Yeah, he's a fine fellow.
Tim is well known in Australia, has been on any number of TV series, and has taken an interest in mid-century modernist architecture, has a house of his own. He's been a guest on our show, and he does these shows in modernist houses and other places called Man About the House, where he tries to get the public on board with helping preserve these houses and become aware of them. And that seems like a natural opportunity to have a martini injected into the setting.
I think you're exactly right. I've been fortunate to be part of some of the early Canberra Modern programs, and they get me involved. So we're doing an event back in May for this year's program, and it's going to be a tour of a house in Canberra, historical house, modernist house, and I'll be creating martinis for that. When you think about more deeply about that kind of modernist ethos, it's the optimism.
Yes.
The martini is both a potent drink and a dangerous drink, but it's also, it's a cultural icon in and own right. And you'd have to walk around very far around here, for example, and every bit of logo or branding, it's got the martini glass everywhere you look. And I think that's to do with the fact that nothing says you're relaxed. Now, the degree of affluence linked to this as well. So a cocktail hour, when you think about the lifestyle, it implies a degree of affluence.
Right.
Or, middle class and up, be able to have the leisure time, to entertain friends, to have the actual environment.
Aspirational affluence.
And that too.
I want to be that rich.
You want to be that rich, exactly. So you come to a place like this or come to a modernist event, you have a martini, even for like that 15, 20 minutes you're holding that glass, you're lending, in a subtle way, some of that glamour. That is modernism applies.
I don't think about going to a baseball game and having a martini.
No.
It doesn't seem to fit in that environment.
No, I've got a few rules, where because there are exceptions to any rule, of course. But if it's sports on the TV, it's probably not. It's not really a natural martini habitat.
Yeah.
That's one of my sort of rules. But I've been, airport bars you can, just because airports and jet sets and martinis logically kind of fit together. So I've got a few ground rules of where I gauge where I can probably successfully get a decent drink or not. It's a jungle out there.
It is.
I went to one place, I won't name where, on my travels recently, and it turned up in a tumbler, sea of ice with no garnish. So it was a very generous, almost like a third of a bottle, just glug, 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 glug. Very generous Southern hospitality. But it wasn't a martini as we would know it.
It was just sort of a mixture of...
Just booze.
Did you send it back?
No, I didn't want to waste it.
Tried it out, yeah. Now, I was wondering, have you come across any kind of really unique oddball martinis? Like I was thinking this morning, I wonder if there's a breakfast martini.
There is, in fact. This will sound terrible for the uninitiated, but you can get away with it. So it has like an orange marmalade, like literally the thick cut. The English ones are particularly good. A bit of Contro maybe, gin or vodka, nice spicy one. If you want a bit of punch to it, equal measures. And
Does this one have a name?
It was a breakfast martini because it tastes exactly like marmalade on toast.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would love to have that tomorrow morning.
It works. It works. Trust me, it does.
And I assume that at the other end of the spectrum, there's some sort of dessert martini. There's a.
Oh, well, see this.
But does this stray into bad territory?
You're getting the impression I'm a purist, aren't you? So anything like chocolate, lychees. Time and place for everything, clearly. So again, if it's in a cocktail glass and with tini doesn't make it doesn't make it right. It does. So, but you can do things like, let's talk about the different permutations. There's the classic dry martini. Right. But back in the day, and we're talking 20s and 30s, they made them quite differently. So it was almost a thing called a perfect martini. It's half vermouth and half spirit. So half gin or half vodka. And that's a nice entry level. If you don't like it too dry, very often they go wrong. It's got to be really chilled.
Yeah.
Nice ingredients, if you can get away with it. I like mine stirred, not shaken. I could go on about that for a whole episode. The default American way of making martinis to shake. I think it's just efficiency. It's just to get them out faster.
Yeah.
If sometimes you don't want to dry, you can actually, towards the end of a nightcap, have one with more vermouth in it. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit more spicy, but more rounded, not so boozy. A martini shouldn't taste like booze. The other paradox, it shouldn't taste like booze. It really should be greater than the sum of its parts.
Okay.
A good martini.
Yeah.
But even when I'm home, I might only 1 in 5. I'll kind of land it.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll go, what was I thinking?
So sometimes the martini whisperer.
You've heard it here first. You've heard it here first. Yeah, that's real exclusive. Even but I mean, sometimes I'm just not concentrating. Yeah. I'm in a bad mood. I'm not. If you just.
I'm glad you're not my cardiologist.
Yeah, don't want to get it right every time. Yeah. Most definitely. Yeah.
Outside of your purist ethic, what is the most horrifying teeny drink that you've come across that is just like you're thinking to yourself, how in God's earth could people be serving this to humans?
It came in a tumbler. It was a whole bunch of ice on the rocks with black, the olives on pizza?
Yeah.
Black Kalamata olives in it. And I went, what the heck is this? I didn't want a pizza in a glass.
So you had ice and olives in there floating around?
Yeah. That was sent back. I thought, what the heck? There's been occasions where I've had to make them myself, gently. I can see they get a bit lost. Here, most people will know how to at least throw a drink together. Back home, not always the case. And I'll generally go, I'll get a blank stare of terror. Mm-hmm. So my idea of extreme sport is going to a new bar, ordering a dry martini and seeing what happens. I should get out more, but it's my idea of extreme sport. Because sometimes you just don't know what you're going to get. And on occasion, I'll get, there's usually one person who knows what they're on about. Sometimes you might get, quick, get Derek here, whoever knows who is the go-to guy. Occasionally, I'll offer an impromptu lesson, respectfully, and I'll step them through it.
Do they ever offer to hire you? Give you a job offer?
Oh, they can't afford me.
No.
Oh, good.
But I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yeah.
And I'd driven 14 hours across New Mexico, and all I wanted at the end of this 12-hour drive was a really stiff, cold martini, crossing the desert, literally. So we stayed at a very nice hotel. I'll name nameless for a moment. You'll understand why. Order dry Tanqueray gin, stirred, not shaken, very specific. And I hear this. That's someone's margarita. That can't be mine. And it turned up you could have sunk the Titanic in this glass. It had so much ice in it, and no garnish, nothing. And I went, $30, thank you very much. Really, honestly. So I was just desperate for a drink, so I just knocked it back, and I was furious. Anyway, walked around the corner and found this neighbourhood restaurant, and they did have TV on the sports on, but they had the sound off. But I could look behind the bar and I could always do a quick little scan. I could see what bottles they've got and what mixing stuff. And I think, okay, we're in safe territory.
Yeah.
So they make a very agreeable martini, and I'm halfway through the drink, and they go to take it away. I'm a bit paranoid at this point. Right? So they go to take the glass away. So what? So we're just offering you a fresh glass, sir. So what they did, they took it away, give it a quick rechill, little top up, and made a fresh glass for the balance of my drink. And I thought, that's a class act.
Yeah.
So Scottsdale, Arizona redeemed itself after.
Excellent.
Do you remember the name of this little
neighborhood bar?
I wish I did. It's in Old Town Scottsdale. I've pretty much started with a B. I'm going to say Banderos or something like that, but I'm happy to correct it.
Sounds Mexican to me.
Yeah. Lovely neighborhood, kind of steakhouse, great little bar.
That's a great story.
I know, but we're within half a block of each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So thank you.
Well, Philip, thank you so much for dropping by. We invited Philip about 3 hours ago to appear on the show, and he gracefully appeared at our door. So thank you for joining us. This was fascinating to talk to you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, guys.
Thanks for listening. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for Modernist houses. 919-995-0550. Okay, take us out, Tom.
Visit USModernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 7,000 modernist houses by the most well-known mid-century architects, and access 2.5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Chief of Guest Research Cindy Stratton, not a real name, prefers not to be mentioned on the show. Oops. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back with another intoxicating, spirited, stirred and not shaken edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.
Cheers.